All right, let's get right into it. We're going to be talking about one of the biggest, but also one of the quietest threats to our health on a global scale: antibiotic resistance. You see, the World Health Organization just dropped its updated most wanted list of these super dangerous bacteria, and we're going to decode exactly who they are and why they're such a massive problem.
I want to start with a number that should really make you pause: 1.27 million. That's how many people are estimated to have died directly because of antibiotic resistant infections in just a single year, 2019. I mean, to put that into perspective, that's more deaths than from HIV/AIDS or malaria in that same year.
And this incredible death toll, it isn't from some big, visible catastrophe. It's from an enemy we can't even see with the naked eye. We're talking about microscopic bacteria that have literally evolved to outsmart the very medicines we invented to destroy them. This isn't some sci-fi movie plot. It is a silent pandemic that's happening all around us right now. Now, there's a formal name for this threat. It's called antimicrobial resistance, or AMR for short. The WHO actually considers it one of the absolute top global health threats of our time, and for good reason. It threatens to undo decades of medical progress. So AMR is a broad term that covers all sorts of microbes. But for this explainer, we're really going to zero in on antibiotic resistance in bacteria. And why is that? Well, it's because they're causing the heaviest burden right now, driving these really devastating infections that hit low and middle-income countries the hardest. So how on earth do you fight an enemy that's so widespread and complex? Well, you have to prioritize. You've got to know who the worst offenders are, and that's exactly where the World Health Organization comes in. They systematically identify and rank these threats to help guide the entire global response. The WHO first put this most wanted list together way back in 2017, and it was a total game changer. It really focused researchers and, the money on the biggest, baddest threats. But this is a constantly changing battlefield, so they've just released the brand new 2024 update. And look, this isn't just some random list they threw together. It is built on a really rigorous scientific process. You can think of it like this. First, they pick the bacteria and decide what criteria to judge them on. Second, they pull together all the evidence. Third, and this is key, they survey experts all over the world to figure out what criteria matter most. And finally, they double-check the ranking to make sure it's solid. So what did those 79 experts say was the most important factor? Well, it turns out treatability, simply how hard is the bug to kill, was the single biggest piece of the puzzle. When you add that to mortality and the trend of its resistance, those three things alone make up nearly half of a superbug's entire threat score. Okay, so now that we know how they made the list, let's get to the results. It is time to reveal the 2024 most wanted list, and we're going to start at the top with the absolute worst of the worst. This right here is the top tier. These are the critical priority pathogens. We're talking about the bacteria that pose the greatest and most immediate threat to the entire world right now. And this list really shows you the scale of the challenge. You've got these so-called gram-negative bacteria, like Acinetobacter baumannii. These bugs are naturally tough. They have this extra outer layer that's like armor, which makes them incredibly hard to kill. They've become resistant to carbapenems, often the last resort, most powerful antibiotics we have. And right alongside them is drug-resistant tuberculosis, a disease that's already a nightmare to treat. Okay, moving down one level from the most critical, we land on the high-priority pathogens. Now, don't let the name fool you. These still represent a hugely significant and urgent threat that we need to act on. Here, we start to see some names you might recognize. MRSA, that notorious hospital superbug, is on this list. But look what else is here. Drug-resistant Salmonella and Shigella, bacteria that cause food poisoning, and drug-resistant Neisseria gonorrhea. This is so important because it shows the threat isn't just locked away in hospitals, it's out in our communities too. And that brings us to the final category on the list, the medium priority pathogens. Now, let's be clear. Medium priority does not mean harmless. Not at all. These bacteria, like Strep A or Streptococcus pneumonia, can cause really severe illnesses, everything from strep throat to pneumonia and sepsis. Their growing resistance just makes treatment that much harder, especially for the most vulnerable people, like young children and the elderly. So, okay, there's the list, but what's the story behind the list? I mean, what can we learn by looking at what's changed since 2017? This is how we see the silent pandemic evolving in near real time. This is where it gets really interesting. On one side, we have a little bit of good news. A bacteria called Pseudomonas aeruginosa actually got downgraded from critical to high, maybe because resistance rates have stabilized a bit in some places. But on the other side, Shigella, a common cause of really bad diarrhea, jumped up from medium to high. That's a huge warning sign that everyday infections are becoming untreatable, especially in places with poor sanitation.
But honestly, the single biggest headline from this new list is this one: the addition of drug-resistant tuberculosis to the critical list. This is a massive deal. It's a signal that the global fight against TB is being seriously undermined by resistance, making an already brutal disease even harder to beat. So this all leads to the big question, right? What do we do now? What does this updated list actually mean for the global fight against these superbugs? This list is so much more than just a piece of paper. Think of it as a strategic battle plan. For researchers, it's like a giant sign pointing and saying, hey, work on these. For governments, it helps them decide where to put their public health money. And for doctors and nurses on the front lines, it helps guide their infection control plans. It gets everybody on the same page. And the fight has to come from all sides. Yeah, developing new drugs is absolutely critical, but it's not a silver bullet. We also have to make sure everyone can get the effective drugs we already have. We have to get way better at just preventing infections in the first place, with basic stuff like clean water and good hygiene. And we need to be watching constantly, tracking how these superbugs are evolving. So that's it, the 2024 Superbug list. It's a really sobering look at an invisible enemy that could literally unwind modern medicine as we know it. And it leaves us with a pretty stark question: a world where a simple cut or a common infection could once again be a death sentence? Well, that's not dystopian fantasy anymore. It's a real possibility. Are we really doing enough to prepare for it?